and welcome to our episode of the Public Education Panel Series. Tonight, I'm joined by some fabulous practitioners, and we are going to be discussing spirituality, the light, the dark, and the spiritual bypassing. And tonight, I'm joined by Anna Serafine, a feng shui consultant, a transformational healer, a spiritual mentor. Her work bridges shamanic practice, metaphysical wisdom, and ascension teachings, and she is the creator of the modality Integrated Soul Healing. I also have Heather Zimmerman, founder of a Divine Ascension Co., where she bridges the gap between behavioral psychology and spiritual practice, a shamanic energy healer with a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in applied behavioral analysis. And we also have joining us Courtney Buckley, a guide who specializes for neurodivergent and highly sensitive souls to guide them to safety, clarity, and authentic living. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me for this exciting episode and this important conversation. I hope everyone's doing really well today. Good. So, with our theme today, we are going to be exploring the necessity of balance in spiritual practice by examining the interplay between the light and dark, between the shadow work and the positive aspects of spirituality, but also looking at the phenomenon of spiritual bypassing and how we can get fixated on too much positive or too much negative and how it affects our overall spiritual exploration. Because whilst spirituality can be a profound tool for healing, meaning, and transformation, the imbalances in the approach can also cause serious problems. So I'm so excited to get all of your input on this and to hear from each of you. I was hoping to start with the role and the value of shadow work as you all understand it. So Heather, would you like to start with that? Would you like to tell us the importance of shadow work?
Sure. So a lot of spiritual teachers and memes and things that you find really focus on the positive aspects of the spiritual journey, but there's so much more to it than that. And the shadow work is a really important part, especially in my opinion, because as we grow and evolve, we have to learn how to balance the light and the dark. And shadow work is basically going it within and finding the things that maybe society doesn't think is acceptable. And a lot of it really can be very empowering when you have a full spectrum idea of who you are, that full self-awareness, because it helps you react to situations differently because you know about these things that are within you. And I think a lot of people think that shadow work, it sounds very daunting. It sounds very difficult. And I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. The way you approach it and the way that you really look at it with an open mind and really learn to accept these things about yourself, it actually can really change your life in a really positive way.
Absolutely. That's so well said. I totally agree. It's one of the most empowering things you can do to approach your hurts and your flaws and your patterns of sabotage through shadow work. It can really lead to an integrated existence.
Mhm.
I totally agree. Anna, I'd love to hear from your thoughts on shadow work and its importance in healing.
Yeah. So I'm a Scorpio, and we're all about shadow work. I think like we're born doing shadow work. Um, and what I've come to realize what it means, well, for me and for my clients is, or for humanity really, is how it teaches us to love, well, first to see the parts of ourselves that we are too terrified to see, because there's usually tremendous fear around seeing those parts. Fear of being somehow bad or not enough or lacking in some way, unlovable, I would say, especially. And so, what shadow work can teach us is to be present with, to accept, and eventually love unconditionally those parts of ourselves that we think are so awful that we buried them down and just didn't want to see them. So it teaches us first the most important thing is to become aware of them and to see them. It's our blind spots. It's the parts of ourselves that we just don't want to go, we don't want to go there. And that's why, we tend to bypass a lot, right? Otherwise. But so for me, it's been really learning to just simply be present, be neutral with those parts, and just see them through the eyes of God, source, whatever you want to, spirit, whatever word you like to use, which is with unconditional love and acceptance. And then eventually to love unconditionally those parts of ourselves. And that I think is some of the most deeply healing work we can possibly do. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely what you've said is so true. And like you said, it's so hard really to reflect on shadow work because it's so revealing and it can be so difficult to acknowledge those parts of ourselves. It's such a tender process. But I think, as you said, you learn to love yourself through it and other people as well, funnily enough. And it really does set you free from certain things that you didn't realize were having an effect on you. Courtney, I'd love to hear what you have to say about shadow and the healing process.
I love how Anna brought in the zodiac because as a Cancer, actually my moon and my sun are both Cancer, so I'm extremely emotional, and bringing shadow work into my experience for a very long time was very much rooted in fear, because I believe personally that shadow work is that part of us that we typically avoid. But now through the spiritual journey that I've been on, I feel like I've changed my lens, obviously. It's more of a befriending than it is an avoidance. I have learned to acknowledge those deeper parts that are not so comfortable, the wounds and the beliefs that I didn't know that were kind of leading my life, and bringing those into conscious awareness really sets the way for maturity and like spiritual maturity, presence, authentic compassion. When you really learn to sit in those shadow parts of yourself, it really expands and widens your perspective on so many things rather than, again, where we're generally going here with bypassing. It's so easy to bypass all of the work when you just want to sit in love and light. So this shadow work is very, very essential in getting to those rooted fears within yourself to uncover, unmask, unfreeze, if you will, and kind of layer by layer. We're all like a little onion, peeling back those layers little by little so that we can essentially find that safety within ourselves and begin the healing process. And I think it's just so crucial to say that. I remember the first time that I did a shadow work session. It was in the bathtub, and I don't do baths very often. But I went in with the thought of surrounding my mom because there's a lot of unhealed trauma there. Love my mom to pieces, but there's a lot of unhealed trauma there. And in that session, something very unexpected happened. I learned that I blamed my mom for a lot of things for a long time. And in that session, I learned that it wasn't really, my mom wasn't the root. It was my brother, in fact. And it was shocking, and it was a little sad at that time. But sitting in that discomfort really changed the lens of where I saw this trauma come from. It allowed the space to have clarity come in. And when that happened, it all, even within my relationship with my mom and my brother really changed because it came from a place of love rather than blaming or anything like that. So I really think that shadow work is very essential in the evolution of spirituality.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's such a positive insight and powerful insight that you bring, is that, shadow work really is accountability at times, and that the people that bring out aspects of our shadow are also just people. Our parents are just humans doing the best they can. And it's all about, being able to move into those spaces of authenticity and compassion. And shadow work really allows us to do that, like you said. And it is incredibly vulnerable and incredibly tender. And I just think that all of you have said, how it helps you really approach spirituality with a more grounded and full lens, let's say. So just on that note, I did feel like for this episode that I wanted to also talk about where too much shadow work, or rather the cynicism that can come from these overly intellectualized shadow work, the fixation on shadow work, let's say, can cause a cynicism. Because in the psychology world, I'm also a psychology graduate, and I do a lot of work with sort of Jungian interpretation, symbolism, things like that. And I have noticed that some of the fixation on shadow work can lead to a kind of ego-driven cynicism where they get purely intellectual, and then it's almost like the positive is not possible, or the spiritual is kind of looked down upon. And so I'm so excited to have all three of you here who have a combination of the spiritual with the sort of shadow healing and shamanic work, as well as the counseling aspects that you all have. So on that, I'd love to know what you think about, getting too stuck in your shadow, or too stuck into intellectualizing the healing, and where is the light aspect important? So I don't know, Heather, would you like to start us off on that?
Sure. So there is a couple different things. First, as far as the cynicism, you have to become a very well-rounded person as you go through your spiritual journey, and there's different aspects that kind of go hand in hand. And I always tell people that self-love and self-worth and having healthy boundaries are really important, especially as you go through with the shadow work, because you have to have compassion for yourself, but you also have to realize that you are an extension of source, that you are worthy of all of these things that are possible, and that you can create the life that you desire. And with that, as you go through the shadow work and you see these things that are uncomfortable, that you have to sit with, these unhealed wounds and traumas, there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you allow it to be there. But you also have to feel like you deserve it. And so there are some people who are very analytically minded, and there's a thing where people kind of get addicted to the healing process, and they never really allow themselves to get out of it. Some people identify by their, diseases or illnesses or mental disorders or whatever you want to call it, and that they kind of get themselves stuck in a box where they don't allow themselves to move forward with that. So they kind of label themselves, and then that's the reality that they create. They never really allow themselves to get out of it. So I think you have to focus on both things, the healing, but also knowing that this is not even like real. This is just my vessel to help me get through this game, this dream, whatever you want to call it. And that underneath all of that is your eternal soul. You're an energetic being having a human experience, and this is not your identity. And so I think getting out of that kind of mental loop is really helpful to get to that next level where you know that this isn't who you are.
Sure. Amazing. Amazing. It's so true, because the identification of the wound, or the identification of the trauma or the illness, exactly as you said, that is such a real thing. And it's so significant in the healing practice, and especially with chronic illness. The people that identify too much with it seem, it can get a hold of them. And then people who are able to identify to other realities or other possibilities, it can sometimes shift the whole process. And I love what you said about the light is at the end of the tunnel if you allow it to be there. And I think that's so important with not getting too cynical about your flaws and about the trauma that you have. It's not to diminish it or to negate it in any way, but to also realize that you can create a transformative process where you move through that thing into something else. And I think what you said there was so amazing. Anna, do you want to expand on that thought for us? Like where shadow work, where the fixation creates a cynicism or a superiority, blocks the light?
Yeah, I really also loved what Heather said about this, especially using the word addiction. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. It is an addiction. Um, and I can't tell you how many people I've known who do become addicted to, going into the depths, into the shadows, and they spend all of their time in that space. And yes, they become associated with it. Uh, And what, to me, I think one of the biggest dangers of that is many of the people I know who've been in that place are healers themselves or talented people themselves, and it has actually prevented them from going out and doing the work they're supposed to do to help others. Like I knew somebody back when I was living in Barcelona who was constantly like working on herself, working on her shadows, going there, which is admirable that but that's all she did. Like she was an amazingly gifted shamanic aromatherapist. I mean, she had so many gifts, and instead she constantly had to be working on healing herself from all of this trauma and whatever. So she stayed in that space and never really gave herself the opportunity to do the work that she's here to do. And it's terribly sad, because I'm pretty sure she has passed away. And that is, I think, a waste. And I've known other people to do the same. And I think also when we stay in that energy of the trauma, just repeating the trauma and going back and digging deeper, we're then more liable to be picking up on all the darkness in the world around us. And then it just becomes a total spiral. And we become, I think, sucked into that and become kind of walking transmitters of trauma and pain and suffering, and not taking that step to go into the light, to step into, the transcendence, the transmutation of this, because, and the acceptance and the transmutation of it, and to utilize it for light work or whatever you're here to do to express your own inner light on the planet. And that, I think, it is kind of tragic. I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but I do think that it can be tragic because there are so many incredibly gifted people out there, but they just stay in that space. And I it's a trap. It's a trap unless you are very careful. So yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with what you're saying. It's like a revolving door to a certain extent where you're just going round and round over the same thing. And we all acknowledge the importance of shadow work. I'm a huge believer in doing the excavations, but it's like it has to compost you into growing your next phase, or like you said, acceptance and transmutation. That's such a beautiful word, is to actually transmute the negative or the dark aspect into something else, is a very important takeaway. And like you said, like I've experienced this, I've experienced some fascinating minds in the psychology world and other places in the spiritual healing world as well, where it's just like, this person is amazing, but they're so stuck in their cynicism or their defeatistness about their troubles, or the impact that their trauma has had on them, and they just they don't really see a way forward. And I think that's something that spirituality really offers us, or source or connection or God or whatever word you want to call it, is that ability to transmute, which is so important. I loved what you both said. And Courtney, would you like to add to the pot what we're talking about, the difficulties of getting stuck in the shadow?
Absolutely. I think it's so easy for us as humans to get caught in that trap. And even more specifically, I want to lightly touch on this, is that being a neurodivergent individual who has very easily hyper focuses on things, you can get into that trap of over identifying or sitting in that space of wanting to heal, or wanting to learn more, one more certification, or whatever. So it's really easy to fall into that trap. And I have certainly been there, probably more times than I would care to admit. But when you then become aware of what is actually happening, or when someone kind of puts it in front of your face, that you're like, oh, I really need to change this, course correct here. I think that it's for me, it became more of like a not so much that I wanted to stay in victimhood or be a martyr of sorts. It was more just like I unintentionally wore it as a badge of honor. I remember growing up, I was super hyper independent. And I was I learned to mask at an early age, read rooms, all the things. And so I became the one that didn't need a lot of help. And I didn't know how to ask for help. And my parents used to wear that as well as a badge of honor. And when I realized, one day I woke up and I'm like, oh, this is not a good thing. This is not something that we should be wearing as a badge of honor, because we're brought here to be able to receive with love and in all sorts of capacities. And I think that when you over-identify your trauma, like you said, like both of you said, you can really attach yourself to, oh, this is just who I am, this is just me, which closes off that side of you that of growth, really, of moving through that trauma and that shadow of yourself, and transcending it into more of a positive light, more positive situation. So I think when you kind of, again, change that lens, a little shift in the mindset, you kind of naturally come out of that cynicism, the victimhood, and and you learn to detach from that badge of honor. And I think spirituality along the way kind of just teaches us to kind of, and it can do it very naturally too. So I think a lot of the people that want to do that don't always have the tools to do that, right? They stay in that because they don't know how to move out of it. So sometimes I think some people use it as an identity because it's what's comfortable to them, rather than using it as a tool of growth. And and in turn, it is that darkness starts to define them, and becomes a form of avoidance rather than like a forced positivity, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is exactly like you said, and like Anna was saying as well, that you if you get too focused in it, it's like the energy of it becomes sticky, and then that's what your reality becomes, and you see more of it and you experience more of it, and it's almost like it perpetuates itself. And again, just to be very clear, we're not negating the difficulty of any of these experiences, but I think what we're getting across here is the importance of the shadow work, but also that it's a yin yang kind of experience, that on the one hand we're bringing the shadow into a conscious awareness, but we're not overly identifying with it or or giving the dark more power over us than our own ability to transmute it. I think that's what's really what you've all said so beautifully. So it's the importance of recognizing shadow as a conscious awareness and something that we have to work on and work with, as well as allowing ourselves that light at the end of the tunnel. So on that note, let's move a little bit into the dangers of being over identified with the light as well, because that's the other aspect where we become totally positive and totally embracing the wonders of the world, that we never actually ground ourselves into any kind of serious healing. And what a lot of us in the spiritual world and in the shamanic practices get labeled as woo-woo or over the rainbow bridge and all these typical funny judgments that are passed to our type of healing and our type of work. Let's delve into that a little bit and have the light shine on us and see what we have to say. Anna, would you like to start us on that? What is the danger of the woo-woo world and not actually being too associated with the light?
Where to begin? I'm reminded of a series of videos there was, I think back in like 2010, 2011. It was, forgive me, shit New Age girls say. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was hilarious. And it was like, oh, let me feel your aura. Oh, let me pull a card. It's sanctuary. And I was in a spiritual group uh, where we worked a lot on spiritual psychology, and it was actually a very balanced teacher and group and everything. And we were just laughing and laughing and laughing because, yeah, it's so it's become a cliche, I think, of these ungrounded, spaced out, woo-woo kind of people. Even the word woo or woo-woo, right?
Yeah.
It kind of says it all. And how many people have we known who, they live in their upper chakras, completely
Totally.
disconnected from their lower chakras, completely disconnected from reality, which can be a good thing. We have to know when to deny reality. It's like, nope, that's not going to be but to do it from a grounded place, because if you don't embody the spiritual work, if you don't embody the energies that, these very high frequency energies that we work with, if you don't bring it into the body and ground it, we're just going to be floating around all over the place. And that is also an addiction. I know that early on when I started to channel, I got like very addicted to it and all of the like love and light and that kind of stuff, and it became an escape from reality, like 3D world reality. And um it wasn't until later working with shamans, and I do think shamans tend to approach spiritual work and healing in a very grounded way in general. So that's I found that extremely helpful to work with them when working on my own stuff, because it was so much more embodied, so much more grounded. And they wouldn't allow me to stay up in woo-woo lands,
Yeah.
And so yeah, if we don't bring it into our physical world, right? If we keep it up there, I think we're just doing 50%. We have all these chakras for a reason. We weren't meant to only live up here and to be so disconnected from the people around us, the situations around us, right? I think it can make us very difficult to be around and to live with. Which is, of course, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't stay positive, because I think you really should, and yes, there are times when you can with consciously deny reality, right? And just say, nope, yeah, don't tell me what's possible. I'm gonna, but that's different, right? That's a different kind of denying reality. And yeah, I just think it is a danger. And I, but I get the feeling maybe I'm wrong, but I get the feeling that people are starting to embody this more. I've personally meet fewer and fewer of these woo-woo type people, but it could be where I'm living, which is I live in Spain, so it's very kind of earthy. But I remember in New York, I would meet all these very, very ungrounded people. So I don't know if it's that, but I think it's not just that. I do think that as humanity evolves spiritually, that we are beginning to bring this into the body, into our 3D reality, because we've been given these vehicles for a reason. And I just think that there has been a change. I don't know if maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there has been. Maybe.
I absolutely, and I agree with you. I think there was like this explosion of the new age wave, and as you said, everybody's living in the upper chakras, in the blues and violets, and outside of themselves, because transcending reality was much nicer than being embodied. And that's such an important word that you use, the power of being embodied and being in the real world with our feet on the ground. And 100% to the shamanic practices that are more blood and bone, if we can be honest, and they bring us into the ground and make us do the real stuff. Absolutely. But like you said, the ability to have the connection to something of greater than us that allows us to co-create our reality, or to choose a reality that suits us from a conscious perspective, is one of the best powers that we have in this world that we delve ourselves into. And I think there's space for everyone and everything, but I'm really happy to see that there's a more integrated, grounded spiritual wave coming in now, where people are realizing the importance of both. And I think it shows the work that we've been doing, over the years, that it's really starting to create a ripple effect. So, Heather, do you want to tell us your thoughts on the light and the dangers of over identifying with the light?
Sure. And, just like staying in the shadow work, staying only in the light and the love can also be an addiction, just like Anna said. I know when I first started channeling, it was the same way. I was like, I want to be out there all the time. It's so wonderful. It's so new. It's something different. And especially with what the world's going through right now, it's that temptation is really there right now. So to be able to, like she said, bring it in and embody it is really important, to stay grounded and remember that we are still incarnated. We are still here. We still have a life to live. We still have to pay our bills. We still have to do all these things. But also, one of the things that really kind of irks me about the whole light and love thing is when you are only focusing on the light and love, because the whole point of the human existence, or at least one of the major points of the human existence, is to come here to really experience the whole range of emotions, because you can't get this whole range of emotions anywhere else in the galaxy or the cosmos. Earth is a hard school. It's a dense school for a reason. We're here to learn lessons in a more difficult way because of the advanced soul growth that you experience because of them. And so when you are like, okay, well, I'm light and love all the time, and you're bypassing all of the other emotions, you're not getting the full human experience. We're allowed to feel angry. We're allowed to be sad. We're allowed to have grief. We're allowed to be frustrated. The thing is that we have to learn to become masters of our emotions and not let them identify who we are, not sit with that and make that, how we react to our situations. You have to bring in that emotion, feel that emotion, acknowledge it, be like, okay, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to show me? What do I have to learn from this? Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you for showing me that there was something that needed healed or something that needed my attention. I appreciate you. And then release it. Before you blow up on people, before you overreact, or before you kind of, let that determine how you live your life. So it's about being a master of those emotions, but not ignoring them altogether, because they're just going to get bottled up and eventually you're going to explode, just like these people where they're like, I worked in retail. I've worked at a bar, and people come in and they get angry and they yell. And I'm like, okay, are you hangry, or are you just like bottling up these emotions? And this is the only way you can let that energy out, because they're energy. So that when they get pent up, I mean, you can only fill your vessel so much, your energy field so much before it starts to release on its own. So it's up to you to take the accountability to feel those things and release them and not let them become who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, what you're saying. I think especially, and learning to regulate, and just never admitting that you have that negative side to yourself, or that not negative, but that other side of the coin, or the other side of the emotions, or you've been impacted by an experience or something. And I think you're actually leading us on to another point, which I'd like to just ask you before we go to Courtney's point of view, is, do you think that in moments of being too associated with love and light, that there is almost a area for abuse to occur, where we're allowing too much tolerance towards sort of harmful behaviors? And like you mentioned, working in retail and things like that, where suddenly, and that's not exactly linked because that person didn't, has to be in the service industry, but in other areas where we're actually creating a space of allowance for harmful behaviors because we're not calling things what they are. What do you think about that, Heather?
So, as I mentioned earlier, everything is kind of out of a self-love point of view. Like, you have to have healthy boundaries. So when you're only focusing on light and love, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be that person who causes a confrontation, or I don't want to be the one that causes a fight or makes anyone feel uncomfortable. Well, now you're getting to the point where you don't have healthy boundaries, because you are now letting people take advantage of you. You're letting people, be disrespectful, or whatever the case may be. So there has to be that balance there, like Anna said about using your upper and your lower chakras. Well, that also is for your emotional states too. You have to be well-rounded and balanced to where you can be compassionate and loving and understanding of someone else and their situation, but also have enough respect and love for yourself to know that, okay, well, now we're crossing a line here, because now you're treating me in a way that I shouldn't be treated. So you have to be able to stand up for yourself. But there is kind of an art to it as well, because you can stand up for yourself and you can call these situations out, still coming from a place of love and compassion and understanding. So there's that art there, that finding that balance of, okay, I don't want to just yell at you or call you names or be like, hey, you're wrong, you're bad, stuff like that, but also be like, okay, this, I recognize, for example, if someone's going through something and they blow up at you, like, okay, I recognize that you're having a difficult time right now and that things are wrong. Are you okay? Is everything okay? Because the way you're treating me, I'm not the one who did this to you. This is unacceptable behavior for me. I don't deserve to be treated like that. So let's figure out what the problem is. Maybe I can help you work through that, instead of just being like, just going off the handle. So there is a balance there that you kind of have to find. And that includes not staying only in the light and love or only in the darkness. There is a middle ground, a sweet spot that you have to find.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying for us. And Courtney, we'd love to hear from you about the light and boundaries and the dangers that you've experienced in your practices.
So I love what Heather had said about, well, pretty much she said it perfectly. I believe that, a lot of people have this view of spirituality as all love and light, and it's just simply not true. I think of energy, and I think of there's no light without dark. We can't have positive without negative energy. They all coexist together. But a lot of people also think that it's just completely black and white, and there's no middle or gray area. And again, that's simply just not true. There's a lot of gray area that is missed. And with that, I think it's the love and light is just one of those. It offers so much comfort, but in a subtle way, it's you really just avoiding the pain, the responsibility, or the accountability. In general, I think it's really, really prevalent when during times of, say, grief or trauma. Really, a lot of uncertainty is in your experience, and we want the hope, the safety, and the control. So we learn to stay positive. But in doing that, I think you can, that's where toxic positivity comes from. And I in doing that, I think you can a lot of times learn how to dismiss other people's pain, and instead of just saying, oh, you'll be fine, or oh, this, when you can really, this is where those healthy boundaries kind of step in, right? When somebody's disrespecting you or something like that. And usually those are rooted in a need of some sort, right? So when you're like, oh, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? All the things, you can still be compassionate towards someone while still holding those healthy boundaries and saying, hey, this is unacceptable behavior. Or I remember the first time laying a healthy boundary, and it was very eye-opening. Like, before, boundaries were never really modeled for me as a child growing up. And so when I started using them, they were very messy. And so it was just really kind of boundaries at that point. I would set them, but I had a hard time upholding them. And the first time I used a healthy boundary, it was completely different. And it was so much easier to use that than it was just what I had been doing in the past, right? Because with a healthy boundary, there's kind of like a give and take there. It was, again, I use my mom a lot as example. She's one of my greatest teachers. So I remember she is very much in that victimhood mentality, the drama and negativity, negative Nancy, I like to call her. And especially over the phone. She doesn't really pull that too much with me in person, but over the phone she does. And I stopped her at one point and I said, Mom, I said, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to get everything out that you need to get out. And I said, and after those 2 minutes, if we can't redirect this conversation to a more positive one, I said, then I'm going to simply have to get off the phone and we can finish this conversation at a different time. And she's like, oh, okay. And I was just like, that was not what I was expecting, the response I was expecting. And she continued, to get what she needed out. She didn't use the full 2 minutes. In fact, it was more like a minute. And then she did. She turned it to a more positive. I'm like, that's how simple it can be when it's truly a healthy boundary. It's not about, it doesn't come off as a threat to that person. It doesn't come off as something that, oh, you need to do this or I'm going to do that. It doesn't need to come off. There's so much love and compassion behind it. And that's where the love and light you can really lives. You don't have to stay there. We are human, a soul living in a human body. We do have negative thoughts. We do. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, like we have these negative spirals sometimes. And but we also have the tools, us in the spiritual community, a lot of us, not all, but a lot of us have the tools to learn how to kind of come out of those negative patterns, right? We have the ability to see past it. And so we don't have to stay in there. We know how to balance the light and the dark. We know how to move back and forth and flow with it. And I think that's such a huge part of it. I think a lot too is that societal conditioning makes us believe, that it's all love and light, and that they shame us for questioning things, for the difficult emotions, for all of you see where I'm going there. But society conditions us like don't question too loudly, or don't do this. And I think that so we get that so embedded that's where we think that this love and light is just how it's supposed to be, and it's simply not true. And that's where we have to unlearn our beliefs, what was conditioned in us, to then relearn what our true values and beliefs really are, not what others have shown us to believe. And in that you can kind of learn to kind of dance in harmony with the light and the dark. I hope that made sense.
It does. It does.
I think it's really a way that love and light, that comfort that we see in that love and light in the spirituality community, it if you have too much of it, it can cause the discomfort. It becomes the spiritual bypass itself.
Yes.
So it's like, don't feel that, or don't see that, don't act on that. But yeah, so
Yeah, what you said about the boundaries was so interesting because, like, someone once said to me, the boundaries are actually not for other people; they're for yourself. You have to hold your boundary, and then you realize the boundary has been breached, and then you have to say, okay, that's where I'm at. So healthy boundaries is huge, huge work, I think, in spiritual development and healing. And as you said earlier in one of in the beginning, your spiritual maturation as well. Absolutely. And you've actually moved us into that space of talking about the bypassing too. But before we jump there, I just wanted to ask Anna about with the love and light, and how not having the boundary there for the awareness of the other side of things, how it can allow harmful behaviors. Do you want to add something on that?
Well, what Courtney was saying, I loved what she said about the shame, because to me, like that's a really important component of this, is that when we get sucked into that love and light, is the only way to go, and that's the only thing we're allowed to feel and be and inhabit. When we have human emotions, like anger or sadness or just irritation, or we just have a bad day, um, we can often be shamed for it by people who are in the love and light cult. Like, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't, and then or we just judge ourselves. Oh, or people will say, oh, be careful of your words, and your spelling, and it's like, just stop. Let me just have a bad day. It's okay.
Yeah.
As long as we're not taking it out on someone else. And I think that's where the boundaries are very, very important. Like, we need to be able to hold space for our full range of human emotions, allow them to be what they are without getting sucked into it and pulling other people into it. I think that's the dance. So it's a boundary for ourselves. It's a boundary that we hold regarding how others treat us, right? I just think that interplay is essential for how we're going to move through the world. And going back to that thing of shame, because that really sticks with me. Um, when we're in that space of shame around our own emotions, we're just increasing the shadow and making that piece of work, that huge piece of work, even bigger, right? Because we're just feeding that shadow by not allowing ourselves to just be human, because we are human and we're, not made to always just live in love and light, right?
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, as Courtney mentioned, the shame is a massive conditioning from the world, and it's one of the worst. I think for women, it's quite an intense one to feel, because we are conditioned to be a certain way, and always smiling and always in service. And men are conditioned or shamed for having emotions, for crying, for being vulnerable, and they are natural human states, as you said, and it does recreate traumatic imprints on us and has a deeper impact, and it makes it much more difficult to heal and to work with. So I
Yes.
can see what everyone is saying about how society encourages us to bypass some of our processes. And I think we should speak more on that. But I do just want to acknowledge what you both raised in terms of the shame, because it is I think, one of the most sticky and uncomfortable emotions to process and to face. And it does make us all kind of shy away from having to admit those feelings. And it is so difficult as young people and as children to deal with the shame. And then it just follows you into your adulthood. It is one of the toughest ones to work with. If you want to add anything else on that, anybody, you can add it in as well. But I'd love to talk about spiritual bypassing and how you define it. So Heather, would you like to start us with that one? Give us your thoughts.
Sure. I think there are a couple different layers to spiritual bypassing. I think the things that we've been talking about staying only in the light and love or only in the shadow is part of that. But there's also a part of taking accountability for yourself too. Like when things happen and you're like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. Like, no, you did something and you screwed up, you made a mistake, or however you want to say it, and you aren't taking accountability for that. You're blaming the universe or blaming the celestial, alignments for your own actions. And I don't think that people realize that they do that because society has programmed us to live in this victimhood mentality. And people are like, oh, well, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Like, well, let's look at it from a different perspective. What is this trying to teach you rather than why is this happening to me? And I think it's all kind of interconnected, but everything we've been talking about is bypassing in a way, whether it's neglecting some of your emotions or not allowing yourself to have the full human experience or living only in light and love. But I think that accountability piece is a really big part of it. And I think when you're not doing the inner work and you're looking for that easy fix or that overnight solution and paying someone else to fix you, when you have to take that accountability and really go within and do the work yourself, which scares people away because they're like, oh, this might be too hard or scary or whatever. Well, no one else is going to be able to live your journey for you. No one is going to be able to fix your problems for you. It's you. You have to take that accountability. And when you don't and you just blame everything else, it really hinders your growth and your spiritual journey. But also, you're not self-aware. You're not, doing anything to heal. You're not taking any of those steps forward. So I think all of that kind of plays together in that one big package.
Powerful, hey? It's powerful how it disempowers your ability to make your progress and I mean, we've all been there, right? We've been a victim of something or we've been a victim of an experience. We've all felt it. So it's not to dismiss that experience, but at the same time, the power and the liberation that comes with, hey, I'm counting myself out of the equation by blaming everything else and handing my power over to the external circumstance, making myself powerless to it. I think in any form of healing or any kind of progress is to actually say, but I'm here too. I'm part of this equation. I have a choice as to how I react or how I process or how I handle this. And certainly for myself in my healing journey, that has been something that I really had to grapple with because initially I just didn't have the boundaries or the strength or the tools or the belief in myself that I could do such things. And that has been for me one of the biggest things. What you're saying is taking harsh accountability and seriously saying, okay, no, I have to do something about this. And it's amazing how once I realized I could, that I was able to start to progressing on my journey. So what you've said impacted me. I resonate very much with what you said.
Well, I would even argue that you are the equation. Like everything else is just part of your outer world, but you are the one who creates your reality. You are the one who is the powerful, piece of your life, that you're the one who makes the decisions on how you react to things, on how things affect you, and it's your triggers, and it's you're the person who's responsible for all of that. So it's, yes, there are things that could play a role in the equation, but you are the equation. You are the one that needs to do all of that, and it all starts within. Like your outer world will start to reflect your inner world, but you have to take the power and remember that that is your responsibility. No one else's. No one else is going to do it for you. They can't.
100%. And what you said is so important, that we also have to honor each other to handle our own things, to handle our own shit. As Anna was saying earlier, it's actually it's dishonoring to try and fix other people also when we find ourselves in that position of trying to fix them or help them when they're not asking for it, or where we've somehow put ourselves in a superior position somehow. It's very powerful what you said. We are only accountable for ourselves, and we must be so. I agree. Anna, do you want to add to that? How do you define spiritual bypassing, and how does it impact the true healing journey?
Ooh, where to begin? Because there's so much there. It's so juicy.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. I was recalling I once years ago had a client come to me, and she's like, I'm just going to lie here and let you fix my life. And I'm like,
Sure, no pressure.
doesn't work that way. I'm not going to do that. I can help you fix your life, but I'm not going to fix it for you. And I was also considering, you know, I'm in a place right now personally where a lot of my, um, in my spiritual growth, where I'm learning how to surrender, which is interesting because for so many years I've been very much in a place where you have to be in your personal power. You get to decide like what, you choose what thoughts you're going to work, you're going to have, you're going to choose your responses, you're going to not be reactive. You're My guides don't want to drive the bus, they want me to drive the bus. So that's the other thing is like sometimes people who are channels and stuff will say, well, my guides told me to do this, my guides told me to do that. It's like, well, but does that resonate? Right? What do you want to do? Your guides, if your guides are telling you to do something that's against what your better, instincts are telling you to do, then that's not coming from the light. So then we get into that whole kind of boundary things between our spiritual boundaries between the light and the dark, right? If something is telling you to surrender your free will, then that is not coming of the light. That's telling you to surrender your boundaries, your power to something external to you. At the same time, there are times when we must learn how to simply surrender to spirit and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to say, here I am, this is where I'm at, help, and I'm giving it to you. So it's a very interesting dance between being solidly in your personal power and keeping your boundaries very strong and so on, yet softening that when necessary to allow to receive the help, the healing, the the love, right, from spirit that is going to help us move forward, right? So I teach an entire thing on like being in your personal power and having spiritual boundaries and protection. I'm all about that. And so it's like I think it's foundational. I think everyone needs to know how to do that. And at the same time, we have to also learn when to soften and when to allow and go into that more yin state. Because the other state can be very yang. So it's again more of a bit of a dance between the two. Um, yeah. So that's what comes to my mind on that. Um, and as when we're here as like channels of light, as healers, as beings who are here to help people in the world, having those very strong boundaries around things. And also, I loved what she was saying about people giving unsolicited advice and so on, which is a major violation of our autonomy, our ability to decide, what I'm going to do and when. Because when you're giving somebody that kind of advice, you're not allowing them to have their journey, to have their own timing, to make those choices. Uh, and you're also assuming that they don't know or they haven't thought about these things. And that also puts you in a place of being better than the other, dominant. Then we get into the whole ego thing about that. So, um, uh, yeah, it's so important. This is just like it's just such an important topic, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Yeah, it is. And what you're saying there at the end, the ego does play a role, I think, in spiritual bypassing as well, because I think, especially in codependent, enmeshed situations, we do end up with one person trying to fix other people instead of looking at their own stuff, so that can also be an example of the bypassing, like you
Oh yeah.
mentioned. Yeah.
Yes. I've known people like that who it's a way of completely avoiding their own stuff and instead like hyper fixating on someone else and how they can fix them and what they should do. And what it actually ends up is diminishing the person. I think it's a form of narcissism, quite frankly.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah, and it just ends up diminishing that person, diminishing their self-worth, all under the guise of helping, right? And that's a shadow aspect that that person needs to look at.
That's a hard one, talking about not wanting to acknowledge the shadow. It's a hard one because you're coming from, in your mind, anyway, a good place, a generous place, perhaps, or a helpful place. It's a really difficult one to look at the shadows when our helpful personas or our controlling personas come through, and they actually have a secret damage or a hidden damage that we don't
Yeah.
realize, an impact on
I
others as well.
I always say one of the best lessons I've ever learned is when to shut up.
Yeah. Yep. True magic that. Courtney, let's hear from you. What do you have to add to spiritual bypassing? How do you define it? What are the risks?
I love what both of you guys both touched on a few things that I absolutely love and wanted to piggyback on, and I'll get there in just a second. But I think that spiritual bypassing is really kind of this all ties so beautifully together. Avoiding discomfort in this spiritual space that we're in. It can allow harm to go unchecked. Really, integration requires that confrontation, the healthy boundaries, the accountability, all that, sitting with the discomfort and not ignoring it. It's, taking responsibility or responsible action even. I think that you can hit on so many points. Like, not all spiritual spaces are safe. There are toxic ones. There the people that live in that love and light, or people that live in that shadow side. It's all avoidance to protect, and it by avoiding all that, it protects the abusive ones, the toxic people. When you have true spiritual maturity, it includes that courage to name what is harmful without attacking someone. With using your compassion rather than pick. Now, is it important to use your authentic voice? Sure. But this was a huge lesson for me. Like, I've always been that person that's super direct. And in times, I've had to have people, the only reason I noticed it is people pointed out to me, like, is my tone of voice didn't match my words. And, in that, I had to learn how to kind of not, and I don't like to say that I had to soften myself. I'm still using my authentic voice, but I'm using how to really kind of match, or like basically use my integrity. You match my tone with my words, my actions with my voice. I'm having to kind of soften the edges a little bit, I guess, not be so harsh, to let that compassion flow rather than being so blunt, because everybody kind of receives differently. While somebody may receive my bluntness or brashness, if you will, openly and well, there's another person that might not receive it well at all. And in fact, we all view things very differently and hear things very differently. Our perspectives are very different. So even one message can be perceived many different ways. And I think I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I apologize.
Okay.
I think what Heather said about taking accountability for your own healing. I love that. I think that one of the most loving things that we can do is offer the tools and take a step back. Let them choose their timing. Let them choose their own healing path. Let them choose, because like you said, we cannot do the healing for them. We can guide them. We can help in any way if they ask for it, which ties into what Anna was saying. It's like spiritual hygiene. Like they have to ask for this. We can't just go in and say, hey, da da da, you need to do this, 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 and this, and this. There's a code. Even I'm giving myself goosebumps, that our spiritual team that asks us to abide by. And our spiritual hygiene is so important. Like, we brush our teeth every day, and if you don't, kind of gross, right? It becomes icky. You got stinky breath. Well, why is spiritual hygiene any different, right? Why don't some people take those steps to maintain their spiritual hygiene? But there's so many people out there that do not. And in turn, they get into this mode of trying to constantly help others because they're avoiding their own. They're bypassing their own healing by outsourcing everything else. And I think that it's so important. Spiritual hygiene being number one. Permission has to be granted. Like that has to be, even in my practice in Reiki, like, I don't offer it unless there is mutual, what's the word I'm looking for? Consent. Thank you. Or even if it's distance, there has to be permission. Or if I know that somebody's going through a difficult time, I don't just offer distance Reiki at will, them unknowingly, because that can cause more harm. They might not internally be able to receive that without like their knowledge, right? It can get sticky at times, like when someone that's dying or that is going through cancer treatment, and so many people get desperate for help and answers, and they say, can you send Reiki for this person? I can send it, but I can't send it directly to them without their permission. I can send it to the situation. I can send it to, what's going on around them, but I can't send it directly to them without them. So if they're not able to communicate, but there are ways to go around it too. You can, connect with your higher self and connect with their higher self and ask for them to have a conversation and see if the permission can be granted that way. But that can get a little sticky too if you're not really in tune with communication with your higher sources. So there's a lot of bypassing. It can go on so many different levels. It's not just, this love and light, or the shadow and or the love and light and the shadow aspects, or the positive with the negative, and all thing. Energy is energy. And I think we encounter these situations on a daily basis. So spirituality, like without that accountability, can become like a very icky place for both of them, spirituality requires us that integration period. Ask us to sit with that discomfort and not to ignore it. We have to be responsible and accountable for ourselves. So I love this conversation, by the way.
I know, there's so much. And what I'm hearing from what everyone is saying, and what you've just said, Courtney, as well, is the importance of like the accountability of ourselves. How are we showing up in this whole process? How are we taking accountability for our healing? How are we taking responsibility for our emotions, our expressions, our practices, the advice that we give, the way that we share, and the reality that we create? It's so powerful to hear all of these perspectives from all of you ladies, and the richness that you're sharing with me is just, it's amazing that the integration that you approach your view on spirituality with, and really bringing all of that to the spiritual bypassing conversation, which I think is something that's so important, because like we've all said, we have clients or we have people who grasp onto the spiritual world as a way to avoid reality. And that's really, I don't think, what true spirituality or true integration asks of us. It actually asks us to go deep, and it actually asks us to open up and to be vulnerable to everything, to just acknowledge everything, accept everything, open everything up, create the healthy spaces, take the responsibility and the accountability. And then just going back to what you said, Courtney, that please be careful of toxic spaces. Just because someone says it's a spiritual space doesn't mean it's a safe space. And that actually, sadly, is a slight reflection on what we're experiencing in the world today. These dreadful revelations that are coming out about, I don't really want to get into it, but you know what I'm talking about, the files and all of these kinds of things. It is important that spiritual people are the beacons that we are, and that we create the safe spaces. But as an individual, we have to be aware of what we're getting ourselves into, and just make sure that we're choosing safe and healthy spaces, because it's not supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, and it's not supposed to make you feel like something about yourself is not welcome or not accepted or anything like that. So it's a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for all your input. I think I want to move a little bit into the idea of what healthy spiritual practice or integration with this process looks like. And I'd love to hear from you guys. How do we bring in, the things we're ashamed of in our shadow? How do we integrate? What does healthy spiritual practice look like? Heather, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So, I mean, depending on what you're doing for the healing process is going to be very different for everybody. The way you approach the steps is going to be very different. Everything is going to be very dependent on that person, because like Courtney said earlier, we all learn differently, we see things differently, we hear things differently. So that approach is going to be very personalized. But I think regardless of that, there are certain steps that you have to take. So you have to first identify the problem, or whatever it is that you're looking at for that next step in your journey. And there's one thing that I take pride in with the way that I heal or teach or do my consulting business is I am all about horizontal partnership. And part of that includes everything you have to ask for permission, whether it is the energy you're working with, the person you're working with, the herbs that you're working with, the candles, everything there has to be, because it's all energy, it's all a specific level of consciousness with everything that you're working with. So there has to be that permission there. And there's also at the end, there's that gratitude. So as you go through the process, you have to identify what it is that you're looking at. You have to really sit with it and feel it and get to the root cause of it, not just the symptoms, but actual root cause, whether that's energy you're carrying from a past life, a childhood trauma, whatever the case may be. You have to get to that root cause, the energetic level of that. And then you have to really kind of do the perspective shift, the mindset shift, because if you don't include that part of it, there's that higher probability that you're going to repeat the patterns and the behaviors in the future. So after the mindset shift, which takes a little bit of time, it's not, instant, but that's part of what the healer is there for, is to help you get to that point. And then you also have to have the integration period. So you have to really get from, I call it from knowing to feeling. So you understand a concept, you have the mindset shift. Now you have to figure out how to embody that and really make it part of your everyday life and use that to react to situations differently or look at things differently. And there's that integration period that I think a lot of people skip. I talk about this often, like when you go on ayahuasca retreats or yoga retreats, you have that okay, I feel better, but you don't have that integration process where you're actually embodying that and carrying that on past that experience. So there's many different levels that go into truly making a healing piece of your journey stick and really change your life moving forward. And as healers, I think, like we were talking about earlier, I'm not here to heal you. I'm here to hold the safe space and give you the tools and resources that have helped me, have helped others. And those are going to be different for everyone too. So you have to have kind of a broad tool belt that you're using, toolkit, and figure out based on the interactions with that person what they need, listening, reading between the lines, looking at their behavior, the way they talk, their body language, and figure out what's going to work best for them. But really guiding the situation in a way where you're not, this is the one thing I love about coaching versus traditional therapy, is that you're asking those open-ended questions where you're helping them reach that conclusion on their own. You're helping them figure out which choice they want to make in their journey without giving them the answers. You're just holding that safe space for them to really do their own healing, but just giving them the opportunity to be with an unbiased person who's not going to judge them, who's not going to tell them what to do, because nobody likes being told what to do. You're just helping them reach those conclusions and make those decisions on their own, because it is ultimately up to them which path they choose. Whether you agree or not, you're just giving them that safe space to be able to do that.
Wow, I love that. The open-ended question of handing them the power to make the choice as well. I love that. And so much of what you gave us so much. Actually, there was so much I wanted to comment on. I specifically love the horizontal partnership. I think that's just lovely because I immediately saw like a balance of energy shifting between the two of you on an equal plane. That was so cool. Thank you, Heather. And then also, Courtney, earlier I forgot to mention, I love the term spiritual hygiene. I thought that was fantastic. That's a great one. Yeah. So, Courtney, tell us what you think in terms of what healthy integrated healing looks like, and also if someone is suddenly aware that they are bypassing, how can they move that into a healthier space?
Excuse me. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to discernment, integrity. I think that true integration means that we're holding the light and the shadow together in ourselves without spiraling, without being consumed by it, without pretending it doesn't exist. I think, and while holding like that ethical awareness, it's all encompassing. It shows up in our choices, in our relationships, in leadership. I love how Heather said that horizontal partnership. It really is. It shows true leadership when you can collaborate with other people and like I'll use an example, like, and I will fully admit that I'm not a born leader. I can piggyback off of things. I can, anyways. But like I'm coming up with this collaboration as we speak, and I am fully aware that planning is not my strong suit, and I don't enjoy it in any way, shape, or form. And I will gladly outsource that. Like, while I can hold the vision and I can hold all of these things, I am welcoming others to come in and help support in that area, right? And I think that really takes true leadership, when you allow yourself to receive in that capacity, you're holding that light and that shadow all at once. You're acknowledging your shadow, one of your shadows, and where you are, one of your weaker points, while offering that light out into wherever, situation or whoever you're surrounded by, and offering that, welcoming that support in. I think it takes a very strong individuals to really kind of hold that, because a lot of people, they bypass that part. I see it so often that people don't know how to really receive help or ask for help, or just receive in general. And yes, it can be difficult. I used to be that person. Like I said earlier, I used to wear like a badge of honor that I would fall on my face before I asked for help. And I had to learn how to kind of balance that. I had to learn how to move in harmony and kind of dance with it, learn where my flow was. And so I could really, really, truly receive it without, we can think we want something, but unless you truly get to the nitty gritty of where that root is, I don't think that it's really truly going to come into your existence. I think that this takes a lot of like maturity in order to hold that responsibility and love. Um, I kind of got off track. I apologize. I lost my train of thought. So if you want to.
No, it's great. I was really interested in what you were saying, but also I'd like to. I know your area, you specifically specialize in neurodivergency, and I think that that's something that I'd like to just talk about a little bit as well in terms of your processes and the information that you're bringing us. Because I mean, that is something where we have to be very aware of how we are different, but we also have to be very compassionate that we have a different way of being and expressing in the world as a neurodivergent. So how would you add a little bit in terms of this conversation for the neurodivergent specifically between what is something they have to be compassionate for and what they have to work on in terms of their integration?
Well, I think when being neurodivergent adds just another layer to all of this, I think, and again, it shows up in every aspect of my life. And so it's hard to deny that aspect of me. And again, I don't like to, and there's a fine line again, like where we can over identify with this part of us. But I think that as neurodivergence, it kind of, we have so much going on up here that sometimes that discernment, sometimes that those initial, like where you want your message to land or the intention behind it can come off skewed. It can because there's so much going on in here, you don't initially think of like, I want it to come out this way, but it automatically just came out another way, so you have to get really, really, I always encourage my clients to practice that art of pause. Really learning how to kind of, if you immediately are triggered by something, or if something kind of rubs you the wrong way, or even in the opposite thing, like you get really excited, like me, sometimes I interrupt because my brain's like, oh, I love that. I love that. And I want to speak on it, but because it's so important in my brain that if I stay quiet, that I might lose the thought, right? So dealing with these kind of imbalances within myself, I've had to learn how to kind of not only practice that art of pause, but really kind of gauge what's important, what's really not, kind of staying quiet when I should of sorts, but really accepting when that sometimes it's okay for me to just be me, like I don't have to, interrupting is, I don't want to say that it's just who I am because of the neurodivergence, but you can learn how to work with it. You can learn how to, instead of resisting and say, oh, that's a bad aspect of me, which I used to do, because I struggled with being unheard most of my life. That was really a thing that came forward in me. I've learned to kind of just sit back and be like, okay, how do I want to respond to something? How do I want this message to be portrayed? Sometimes it could be, a few seconds, a minute, but sometimes it might take a day. It might take a week for you really to kind of bring it forward. So I think that neurodivergence, there's just so much. It's very dependent on a situation. There are tools that we can use to. I mean, I could talk about this for a long time. I know, like when I first had my spiritual awakening, was amidst the global pandemic, right? And so for a long time, a lot of these awakening symptoms, a lot of these things was like long COVID. but then I also realized that I was entering perimenopause. And
Okay.
so imagine going through your initial awakening while you're going through perimenopause, but you've also just, you're neurodivergent and have been your whole life. So it's like, it's like neurodivergence on crack.
Yeah.
You know. But so I've really had to learn how to like and it's not been an easy journey, but really how to learn to work with the neurodivergence rather than resist it. Like I think of the stream of water. Like a lot of us with neurodivergence are always like swimming upstream against the current rather than learning to swim with in flow with the current, because a lot of
Yeah.
people think that it's a curse, and a lot of people but that's because they're resisting their own innate abilities, right? Like when you really learn to work with it, it becomes your superpower. So I think that when you learn to integrate all of these things, it kind of, everything just learns to kind of flow together, which is so huge, especially in a neurodivergent brain, you know, because
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of that. It takes practice in order to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Heather.
I just want to piggyback on a couple of things that you said. First, when you were talking about being a leader and being self-aware and accepting, knowing your shadow and accepting that help, I think this is really important to talk about because I am also a big believer in collaboration over competition. So when you're healing, when you're a healer, especially, and you're trying to help someone and you're either not resonating with them or you can't provide the tools that they really need, it's so important to uplift other healers and spiritual workers to be like, okay, well, I recognize that maybe I'm not the right person who can help you, but here, let me provide someone else who can. And I think that there's so many, you know, the false gurus are all starting to fall, and there's so many spiritual leaders and people in this community who are like, okay, well, I have all the answers, I have all the tools, my way is the right way, I can help
Yeah.
everybody. And we have to get out of that mindset because there's so
Mm-hmm.
many people in the world who are going to be needing help, especially as this awakening process goes and the ascension and all the things, that we have to recognize where our strengths and weaknesses are. And I don't want to call them weaknesses because that's not the case. Just where you can help and where someone else might be better suited. And also with the neurodivergent thing, because I'm also neurodivergent, and I had a thing growing up where I wasn't seen or heard, and I still have, you know, some boundaries around that I'm working on, but I would interrupt people too. And so I got a little light bulb, you can't see it, tattooed on my finger, because when people were talking, I would put my finger up so I would remember I had something to say so I wouldn't interrupt them. So my brain, because multitasking is what neurodivergents do, I'd be thinking about the thing I had to say while still listening so I wouldn't forget. And
I
that's
love that.
fun for myself. It's my favorite tattoo. I love it. But you have to find little tips and tricks and tools that will help you work with your limitations so that you know, make them work for you, make them fun, make them part. And this is part of the shadow work thing, like recognizing where those things are and learning to embrace them. And, you know, this is part of who I am if I choose for it to be, or try to work through it. So there are things that you can do that will help, you know, get through that. But it does everything else you said beautiful. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think acceptance is a really big part of it too. Like when you learn to accept your limitations or where, again, I also don't like using weaknesses as either, but it portrays what our thoughts are right now. When we are accepting of those, we really kind of create space for other things to kind of come in, right? Instead of being in that limiting mindset, we are creating a space for more opportunities to come in, or for more different beliefs to arrive, you know, or to learn, you know what I mean? Accepting what it is that you are struggling with or the challenges that you face really can just create more of what you're actually wanting, but you're unintentionally like bypassing it, right? Like you're unintentionally kind of resisting that. So I think you're right. You can learn to work with it. You can also acceptance, at least for me, is personally a huge, huge, huge part of that.
Yeah, and I think what you're both saying actually ties in so nicely with everything that we've been saying is it really is meeting yourself where you are, being in flow, going where the energy's going, where you're accepted, not tolerated, all of that kind of energy. And I love what you said about the pause, and I think that applies to the power of the pause applies to everybody as well, in terms of how we choose to react. And I just think there was so much fabulous information there about accepting our our quirks and our challenges and parts of our shadows and just the aspects of ourselves that are different and troublesome and wonderful. It all is part of the whole integration thing. Anna, I'd love to hear from you about your ideas about healthy integration and grounded spiritual integration.
Wow, there was so much amazing stuff there. First, I want to say regarding accepting one's limitations, right? A number of years ago, I bought a piece of furniture that needed to be assembled. I am not good at assembling furniture. This one had a book of instructions so thick and with undecipherable diagrams. There was nothing actually written in English. It was just a series of pictures. My brain doesn't work that way. And that box sat with all the pieces in it, sat in my apartment for a year until I told a friend of mine uh, about it. And she's like, "You still haven't put that together?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I'll come over and put it together for you. I love doing that." I said, "Oh," I said, "Well, I'll cook dinner for you because I love cooking and I'm really good at it. It gives me pleasure." And she hates cooking. So the two of us, she was happy as a clam sitting there putting together this stuff. She was enjoying herself. I was enjoying myself. So I think like when we recognize our limitations, quote unquote, it's true. We do like open up space to receive the help we need and so on. And because I think especially women, but I think everybody, we've been so brought up to believe that we have to be good at everything. That, and that there's something shameful about not being able to do it all.
Oh
And
yeah.
that has been so damaging to us. It has created so much darkness within us, so many shadows within us. And I loved it when you said meeting people where they are and integrating things. The modality that I work with, the name that was given to me is integrated soul healing. So it's all about that. And what I do when I work with somebody is, as we were saying, I meet people where they are. I give them in the whole first part of the work we do together space to just be, to be exactly and to explore and to just talk. We just talk for as long as they need to talk. And and sometimes they come to me with like one thing, and then the conversation goes off in a totally different direction. They're like, "Oh, that's not what I thought I was coming to deal with today." And just to give that healthy, loving space of neutrality where you can simply show up and be who you are at that time and know that it's okay. I think we as humans are starving for that. It's just, I think our souls are crying out for that, to just be heard and held and not necessarily do anything during that. Okay. I think that that's really, really important. Just let the person be and and you can just see them like relaxing, and their whole like energy system starts to relax as they feel more and more safe. And then we can start to present maybe alternative ways of looking at things. or start to pull the threads of like, oh, does this maybe make you think of this, and allow them to find their own answers, draw their own conclusions as we lead them and guide them to wherever they should be, right? Whatever is best for them. When I work, I'm like in an altered state, and I always tell them, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't have an agenda. That's where the surrender comes in, right?
Yeah.
I don't have an agenda. We have an intention of something we'd like to work on, but I'm not going to decide how we're going to do this, right? And so then we go in, and all the stuff just starts to reveal itself. Boop, boop, boom, boom, boom. And it's always, I think, to create a space of wonder and discovery in doing spiritual work. Safety, wonder, discovery. It's in a way, I think maybe it's like going back into the womb, where you're held,
Yeah.
you're perfectly safe. You could be exactly as you are. There's no judgment, and you can just play in that energy and see where it takes you. And I think for me, that is so important in our spiritual journey, because I know, like, if I go to receive a healing from someone, and if I feel that I'm not heard because someone has a preconceived idea of who I am or what the problem is, without letting me, share some stuff, like, oh, I know best, you need this. It's like, do I?
Yeah.
Do you? And that's where we have to really release the ego and that whole thing of like, I know best, right? And allow things to reveal themselves in the time that they need to be revealed, without pushing, without forcing, without having an agenda. It's like allow, and that's, I think, our jobs as healers is like we're meant to be clear vessels for these healing energies, and to use discernment, as we were saying also, right? About, we do have to make decisions and choices in this work. And so using our discernment and continuing to work on ourselves so that we're not coming from our ego and our shadow.
Yep.
Because and I think that is what can create the most beautiful types of healing work, where the real transformation, that's the alchemy, that's where the alchemy takes place. That's where the gorgeousness of helping others and working with people is to just allow them to be who they are, allow them to show up, meet them there with just unconditional love and acceptance, and allow us to be vessels to allow how many times have I said allow?
Yeah, we're
To
getting
allow
allowing. I love it.
It's Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, no, I love
that.
it. And I also got as you were talking in the middle there about creating the safe space, the word that came for me was unarmored. Like, you can be unarmored in the space. You don't have to have all your defense mechanisms, and and I think that really is something that we also do with spiritual bypassing, is we have our defense mechanisms, and we're not even aware that we are being defensive or being projecty or whatever it is that we're doing. So that came up for me as you were speaking as well. It was just wonderful listening to all of you, but that was what came up there. So,
Really
I mean,
truly
everyone has
relax.
just given us so much rich reflection and valuable information, and I'm so full to the brim with thoughts and reflections. And I'm just reminded that spirituality is not about choosing either the light or the dark, or just optimism or just depth. It's about learning to hold the full human experience with honesty and humility and responsibility. And you've all spoken so beautifully about a healthy, integrated approach to healing. It's not from denying our pain or endlessly dissecting it to death. It comes from meeting ourselves where we are and allowing everything, as you said, Anna, joy, grief, compassion, anger, insight, and limitation can all coexist in this process without judgment or inflation of our ego. And we don't want spirituality to become an identity, but rather a practice where we are allowing for healing and space to take place. And I think something that was very important was the conscious awareness of how we interact with that. I'm also I made some notes. I mean, the spiritual hygiene, the embodied, grounded approach, horizontal partnership, the strength of integration and accountability, and doing more than just sitting in the therapy chair, actually looking for the empowered choice. You all mentioned these beautiful things. I was writing them down as you were talking. And I just wanted to say that I think what you also said is that spiritual bypassing can really wear convincing disguises. It can look like toxic positivity, intellectualized shadow work, wisdom or sage advice, which is not necessarily welcome or is too focused on, hyper focused on, and creates a distance from accountability or embodiment or responsibility. But you've all mentioned how integration is actually asking courage of us, something braver, to actually be present and to go through the process into a form of healing or transmutation. So that was all amazing stuff that I got, and there was so much more. But I just wanted to say, as we come to a close, I'd love to hear your final thoughts or anything else that you'd like to share for our viewers on this fabulous conversation. And as Courtney said, we could talk for days. But Courtney, what would you like to, as your closing thought?
Well, it just kind of, after Anna closed out there, it just reminded me that back to my core, like my cornerstone of what I do, is that safety is just so monumental. I believe that without safety, growth, change, healing, none of it can take place without it. When your body does not feel that safety, of course you're naturally going to bypass things, either that or you might not have the tools to kind of move through that. So I think that for me personally and the people that I work with, I think that creating that safety within their bodies, within their environments, really is a crucial step in their healing process, so that they don't continue to bypass their own healing, let alone how they show up in the world. Because spirituality at its core is really, it's a lifestyle. It's not something that you use to bypass our healing or our humanity. We can't float above here and expect things to just be all love and light. That's not how it works. So, but safety is really the core foundation for me for any of this. Really, it has to play a major role in order for any of this to happen. So reclaiming that safety has been monumental, and discovering the root causes of who I really am, and seeing that authentic version of myself that I've really never seen before. I remember when that first happened, not that terribly long ago, and it was an eye-opening experience, but it was also deeply sad, because I'd never seen that woman before, that girl. I'd never seen her. And that's what sparked that whole importance of safety and getting that message out into the world, to help anybody that, reclaim that part of them, so that they can move differently, because they keep coming into those same patterns, those same cycles, and they don't know how to exit that. And it all comes down to that safety issue. So I think that for me anyways, or for a lot of us, I think safety is is the key.
And what a beautiful woman you've become. Finally seeing yourself. What a lovely gift.
Thank you.
It's one of the most beautiful things, I think, of the spiritual work when you really do the integration, is not only to take on the hard acknowledgement of, oof, I don't do that part of life that well, but also to realize that, you don't have to be ashamed of who you are, and you can see the wonder that you bring as well, the uniqueness. And that's something we were talking about astrology earlier. We each have this very unique chart. We are very unique beings that will never be repeated. So, having that reverence for ourselves is also one of the beautiful things that can happen, I think. Heather, tell us if there's anything else that came up for you or that you'd like to finish off with.
I would like to emphasize the importance of meeting people where they're at, whether it's yourself or, the other person in a healing situation or just a conversation. Don't expect them to be where you think they should be. Meet them where they're at. It's so important when taking all of these other things into consideration. And one thing I also want to share is just that people find the spiritual journey to be a little intimidating because it does take work, it does take consistency, but it is such an empowering thing. It reminds you really how powerful you are, and how the things that you do, becoming self-aware, doing your inner work, your healing, how it really can start to reflect in your outer world. And taking that, first step is always the hardest, but once you do, it's such a magical and beautiful journey. And there really are a lot of good people out there who can help you work through whatever it is that you need to work through. And part of that love and light thing is everyone's like, oh, raise your vibration. It's love, love, love. Love is the highest. Love is not actually the highest vibration. It's actually authenticity, which stems from love. But authenticity is the highest vibration you can reach. And how boring would it be if we were all the same? Like you said with the birth charts, we are all very unique and wonderful, beautiful beings. And really stepping into that power of being your true authentic self is such a beautiful thing. And I just wish more people would hold space for that, because I don't want to be the same as everybody else. I'm weird. I love it. I love being weird. And some people, that might resonate with them, some people not, and that's fine. I'll find my people. But being your true authentic self, it's so easy and so freeing and empowering than having to put these masks on every day. Like, I'm a different person at work, I'm a different person with my family. It's so it's exhausting. So learning to really embrace who you are at your fullest capacity is such a beautiful journey.
Sure. I just resonate so deeply with what you said, and yay for weird. I get it. It's like that. It's beautiful when you can truly reflect on yourself and say, oh yes, yep, I'm okay with me. That's what I think one of the greatest aspects. That's beautiful what you said. And Anna, what came up for you as last thoughts or extra emphasis or something you wanted to add?
Yeah. Oh, I loved everything everybody said. And I do want to add, I think that for me, one of the greatest gifts we could give ourselves is to learn how to parent our inner child properly.
Oh, wow.
That means to love every part of ourselves, to bear witness to it, to sit with it, to acknowledge it, to see it, right? To give ourselves that space I was talking about earlier, to give our inner child that space, and to learn how to set loving boundaries with it, right? Because the inner child can't have ice cream every day. The inner child, has to learn, to have boundaries, but to show it that they can come from love. So when we learn how to set that for our inner child, then we can operate in the world from a place of much more centeredness, much more peace, and much more authenticity, because we're then emanating our true self, because we've integrated all of those parts into us, and we simply can emanate that. And even people who aren't necessarily spiritual, quote unquote, they will feel that. They may not be consciously aware of it, but they will feel that, and it will resonate with them in some way. And it can change people. It can change the world if you're simply emanating your authenticity from this embodied, integrated place.
Sure, that was a powerful last note, I must say. And I agree 100% that, you know, we can change the world and certainly the environment around ourselves by emanating exactly like you say. And you don't have to be necessarily a spiritual person to do it. If you're working your healing journey and taking your accountability and doing all the things that we've spoken of, I really love that. And I think especially with the dark times that we're facing in the world, as more and more of us are making ourselves known to the world and more people are joining the path and the process and the looking at themselves and taking accountability, I think it is going to be, the shift. The shift is happening. People are awakening to this work and to this thing. And I think that we remain the counterbalance to what else is out there. And we just put our focus on this stuff because it is empowering and it does emanate an energy which can change the world. And I do believe, as you said, Anna, I really do believe that. So thank you, ladies. It was an absolute blessing talking to you about all of this important information and hearing your points of view and your expertise and all your experience. I really feel like this was such a full and authentic conversation, and the power of the word authenticity came through as well, as did the integration of the light and the dark together into a type of wholeness. And the last thing that popped for me was Anna said, to bear witness. And I think we have tried to bear witness today to the power of integration, the power of the shadow, the power of the light, and how it all works together, and the power of helping one another and being there for each other in a supportive way and creating that space to allow change and healing in a healthy, integrated way. And I just want to thank you so much for being here with me today and for sharing your valuable insights and yourselves. Thank you so much. And to our viewers for watching, thank you so much. And we'll see you again in our next episode really soon.